when it comes to doing things like, like with Bill Murray, we said that, I find it ironic that the most dangerous thing about weed is getting caught with it. That to me is like, this is a huge possibility for a crop to have in our facility, our lives. And if you look at an HBR, what we're looking at, one facility will employ
Hey guys, it's Mandi with Global Hemp Association. I wanted to say thank you so much for joining. I'm excited about the opportunity to build a relationship and connect this supply chain. I mean, after all, that's why we started the association. Our association was built on the foundation of connecting supply chain, building relationships, and helping you grow your business. Anyone from farmers, manufacturers, and distributors, people that are passionate about the supply chain, and those creating products selling into biofuels, plastics, textiles, construction, and building materials.
Well, hello, welcome everybody. I am going to turn this over really quick because we have a lot of awesome things to talk about. But I want to remind you real quick, more than half of our viewers, if you're out there viewing, go to our YouTube channel and hit subscribe. We post these videos every Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, and more than half of you are not subscribed. I've been watching you. So please drop your comments. Let us know where you're from. Please drop any questions. We'll be sharing Vinny's contact information as well throughout this. And so, you guys can be sure to connect and stuff like that. But with that being said, make sure that you subscribe to our video and attend our meetings. We do have another event here coming up after this. It's this afternoon at 1 p.m. and it's about the R&D tax credits that are available, how to take advantage of them, and a couple of accountant groups are coming to talk. So, Vinny, tell me a little bit about yourself. I always tell everybody, I want to know a little bit about who you are, what you do, where you came from, and what drives that passion. Because I want to get to know you a little bit and share. And for those of you that don't know Vinny, I'm going to put this out there too, and I don't say this a lot. I respect you so much. Just a heads up. Your background and the introduction that Kayla gave us, I want to say thanks and shout out to her as well and opening her network. But yeah.
Well,
it's all you.
Well, thank you so much, Mandi. And I know that Kayla's not here with us, but she's such a dynamo.
She's running around in Disney World. She's having a great time right now. Lucky girl.
She's wonderful. And the thing that is amazing about you two is that you sat back and listened to what the Hemp-Biorefinery is all about. Mm-hmm. And my approach to the world, my way of looking at the world is different. And Mandi knows my story, and I again, if you look at me, I used to work at UC Berkeley. I live in Berkeley, and I'm a biochemist. My degrees are in the STEM field. But what makes me different and what makes me somebody that you can't really put in a box is that I was born and raised in Oakland. We were dirt poor growing up, and my family. I have deaf parents. Both of them can't hear, and a lot of people when they see that they don't know what to do with that. My daughter, she's in high school, and she was in a group talking about independent contractors, and she said, "My father's an independent contractor. He's an interpreter for the deaf." And the table said, the deaf, you mean like he talks to people on the Ouija board? And my daughter's like, that emoji. It's like, no, not the dead, the deaf, the people who can't hear. And that's been my story growing up. People don't understand. People can't put me in a box. And the way I was raised, I view life differently. My first language was American Sign Language. So I'm a native signer. I'm the guy you see next to Biden or Gavin Newsom on stage, or I'm on stage with Boss Gags, have great conversations in the green room when we're talking. And that's that's how I was raised by deaf parents. So when I look at things, when I look at problems, I was somebody who had to fix things growing up. I was somebody who had to bridge the hearing world to the deaf world. And it's similar to when you look at a periodic table and people say, well, where do you fit on the periodic table? And again, it's putting me in a box. And I said, well, if you look at um, metals and non-metals, it's a great periodic table that shows both. They're different properties, but there's a little stream on the periodic table in the metals called the metalloids. And I tell people I'm a coda, a child of deaf adults, and we're like metalloids. We share properties in both the deaf world and the hearing world. And because I do this, I think differently in terms of looking at a problem than most people I run into. And it's not that I'm smarter or better, it's just a different perspective on life.
Yeah.
I used to be a gymnast, and I was a gymnast. Um, I would say I was a great gymnast, but I had a traumatic injury. So my last landing wasn't quote a 10. I had a bad dismount, and I had what was called a traumatic head injury. And subsequently, I was in a coma.
Mm-hmm.
And while in a coma, my body was withering away, and that condition's called like cachexia. And I had enteral feeding tubes feeding me. And back when I was 12, it wasn't very the meals weren't that nutritious. Didn't have the correct branched chain amino acids and what's going on. And that has led me to where I am. In school, everybody pushed me to go further. And so I have 3 degrees. They're in the STEM field. And I do things that are out of the box. I was on the first wave of the microbrewery industry in California when they legalized it. I got my master's in 82, and they just legalized microbreweries at that time. So and people look at me and said it was illegal. I said, yeah, you couldn't make beer and sell it on site. It was like, this is what the big breweries are doing. And back in the 80s, when I was making microbreweries, I bump into like Anheuser-Busch. Their brewers would look at me and say, we spill in one night what you guys produce, all the breweries, all year. And that's how much we have grown. And I was telling Mandi that this is very similar to the cannabis and hemp industry. It stopped basically in 1937. And on our webpage, I have the whole Popular Mechanics article saying hemp is the new billion-dollar crop. And when I talk about doing hemp and cannabis as a feedstock, I'm not looking at the bud. And when I tell people, it's very similar to there's a strain of marijuana called the white buffalo. And my sisters are my half sisters. They're Native American, and I have a lot of respect for Native American culture and what they did in terms of respecting and preserving the land. And what they did was when they would hunt a buffalo, they wouldn't just look at this as one product. And I'm looking at the cannabis industry, and they're growing their cannabis to make THC, and they want that THC with no regard for the rest of the plant. And if you look at a barrel of oil, and this is what I try to visualize for people because I'm a visual person, a barrel of oil is like 42 gallons. And in that 42 gallons, there's only 19.4% of that barrel that's used for gasoline. There's 12.5% for distillates. There's 4.4% that's used for jet fuel, but 6.5 of that barrel of oil is for other products. And a barrel of oil is put into over 6,000 products that we use in our lives every day, from plastics in our glasses and our combs to there's part of petroleum, clothes, and there's petroleum in our food product.
Yeah.
All these things can be done with cannabis and hemp. And what Mandi and you guys, Kayla, we're looking at, we're saying that, my God, no one's looking at this wonderful plant that has been basically pushed aside since it became illegal in 1937. And what we have done is that we've been working on taking the the organic matters and making value-added products. My the original founder of the company I'm with is Sammy Pierce, and he was the original patent holder of biodiesel from organics. We filed that patent, and if you look on our website, the patent, you can see the patent there. And while he did that, he also trademarked the name biodiesel. And it's since gone generic like Kleenex.
Yeah.
But biodiesel, if you look at who trademarked the name biodiesel, it was Sammy Pierce. And when I was building microbreweries, Sammy came up to me. He invited me to St. Louis and sat down. And he says, "I want you to work with us. I want you to downscale an ethanol plant to make butanol." And I thought, "Well, great. You're crazy." No one's making butanol. It's very difficult to make. And the other difficulty with butanol is that when you make butanol, it's great. You have this liquid. There's 1.2% butanol in your solution, but you can't distill it like you do ethanol. And when you look at the science there, you realize when people talk about cellulosic ethanol from cannabis, that's the big word now. That's fine, but cellulosic ethanol doesn't really is not as efficient in terms of energy wise as butanol is. And butanol is there's 4 alcohols when I talk about this. So there's methanol, propanol, there's methanol, ethanol, propanol, butanol. And with that, people are focused on the ethanol because when you distill ethanol boils at 98, water boils at 100, but butanol boils at 112, which means you have to get out all of that liquid before you get to that 1.2% butanol in your solution. So there's more energy being used to extract the butanol than you would make using the butanol. And with our process, we've overcome that difficulty.
Okay, so I want to remind people, leave any questions that you guys have, because I want to kind of dive into some of this. There's lots of topics and lots of things that you guys are doing outside of just the butanol, right? Or outside of the biorefinery or inside this biorefinery, there's lots of products that come out of this. Before we dive into more of products specifically, can you talk a little bit about the structure of your company and kind of what that looks like, having Sammy as a partner? Now, where are you guys headed and what's the company look like?
Well, I mentioned Sammy Pierce. And again, when I talk about, when I talk to people, I don't want to be the smartest guy in the room, because
you are today.
according to Confucius, if you're the smartest guy in the room, you're in the wrong room. And I'm very, very humble, and I learn a lot from everybody. That's how you can only learn that way. My sisters, when after I got my master's, they said, "So Big Shot, what did you learn?" And I said, "Well, college taught me how much I don't know."
Yeah.
And if you think about it, there's so much out there.
And the real world teaches you what you didn't know in college.
Exactly.
It's just remind you what you didn't learn.
And so I'm always struggling with people when they say, "Well, so you have the answer." I said, "No, I don't have all the answers. I have the gist of what it takes to do what we're doing."
Yeah.
I do things our process uses a biorefinery. And normally people look at a biorefinery as a device will take organics and convert that into solvents or alcohols. And what we're doing is we're taking in our process, I don't use hydrolysis, I don't use any heat, which is another patent that we have. There's a process, I break down the material, I'll break down hemp into a micron size that will then be able to be digested by the bacteria I'm using to produce biobutanol. Cool. Once I make the butanol, and I don't know if you have an opportunity to look at our website, we have an infographic, and it's there's a stream that I show where each product that we produce is being taken up by the leftover from what the other product is not using. So once I make butanol, the sugars that are remaining, I then produce what's called a bioplastic called polyhydroxide alkanate or and polylactic acid. In the acronyms you look are PHA and PLA. The plastics are like incredible. If you look at the PHA, that's the only bioplastic that can break down in with the bacteria in the ocean. Again, it's in the certain climate zones. So there's currently between California and Hawaii, there's an island of plastic floating there that has not broken down. And if it were made out of polyhydroxide alkanate or PHA, easier to say.
I understand that. I can do PHA. Can't do the rest.
So PHA is an incredible plastic. So these are little, they're like beads that we actually produce, and then you send them to a manufacturer who has containers that they have molds for, and they will then extrude these pellets and make these molds, and you can engineer the PHA to dissolve in 3 months, 6 months, so you can control when it breaks down. It's an incredible plastic.
Wow. Okay.
The thing that I'm also doing is that
real quick shout out to Matt. Matt was actually just saying he'd like to talk to you about process of plastics, making plastics, and how they recycle themselves in the time frame you make.
Yeah, and Matt, I know Matt. He's incredible.
Well, shout out, Matt. Thank you.
He's an amazing man. So after we're doing the plastic, Sammy and I wrote a paper for UNESCO. It's United Nations website for, and what we did was we did the paper on food versus fuel, because that a few years ago there was a whole concern about the fact that we're using up valuable cropland to grow an energy crop that could be used for human consumption. And in our industry, if you're growing cannabis and hemp, you don't want to, again, go back to the bud. We're not looking at only the THC. If you look at the seeds, the seed of a hemp plant is so robust, so dynamic in terms of the branched chain amino acids. The only deficiency, and it's a minor deficiency, and you can make up that deficiency, is in the lysine. But other than that, you have all the essential amino acids that a vegan needs in their diet. And we make what's called a protein isolate. And this is a co-patent that we have with the USDA. And this protein, if you look at our website, I tried to do it visually where you can see under a microscope, it comes out like a spherical ball. It's intact. And I was explaining to Mandi.
Can I share the video that you gave me with that explains that? Can I add this? Okay. I'll add it in the comment. You go ahead, and I'm just going to add it in the comment for people to link to.
What's happening is a lot of protein producers will basically, in terms of their extraction, they will rupture or denature the protein. And if you can imagine going to the supermarket and buying 2 apples, and you put them on your counter, and your daughter comes in and takes a bite out of one and puts it right next to the other apple. In a week, the apple that you didn't take a bite out of is still intact. It's still in its natural state. The apple that had a bite taken out of it, that has been denatured. And so if you look at that apple, it's already putrefying. It's wasting away because you've broken the bonds. When we extract our protein isolate from hemp, it's like the apple that's not had a bite taken out of it. And all the other companies that are putting proteins into their power bars and all these other products, they have the protein that's been denatured, which is already putrefying. So it's starting to give off smells. It gives off taste. And if you go to and we presented at the Institute of Food Technologies trade show, the ITF, and our booth was just we shared a booth with the USDA, and we were just mobbed at this booth because all these food manufacturers, they're looking for a protein isolate where they don't have to add all these other masking ingredients. So when you look at a power bar and you have a list of 14 different other products that go in there, those are to maintain the fact that they don't want to have off smells or bad taste in it.
Interesting. So this protein is directly related to, and the why, I guess your why in your accident, right? And cachexia. So this is now used to help treat cachexia and infants and people that are basically dying or withering away due to a number of different diseases.
Right. So if you, I was in a coma after I had an accident. I was a gymnast, and I had a traumatic head injury. And being in a coma, I was wasting away. And people who have cancer, when you have AIDS, the condition's called cachexia. And cachexia is if you look in the medical dictionary, it's the wasting syndrome. And the professors at Texas A&M, they want to use our proteins because it's a plant-based complete protein isolate. They want to use that in the enteral feeding tube. So these are the tubes that go in the body to feed you when you can't eat. And it'll be a complete food. It'll be incredibly nutritious. And the nutraceutical properties in it being a hemp plant is just off the market, off the chart. It's incredible. And everybody that's looking at cannabis, has been involved in cannabis, always know that, people started off opening dispensaries as medical marijuana facilities because of the medical aspects. And what I want to have done is, we can have a line of nutraceuticals in these dispensaries that show, because we will have clinical trials done on the nutritional aspects, so that it's not just my saying it's good stuff or Mandi saying, look, it's it's verified that it's a true nutraceutical product, and it will help in these issues. And again, I don't cure cancer, I don't cure AIDS. I just make the body with this protein more resilient for any of the therapies that are going to take place.
How is it ingested? Is it typically through an intravenous tube, or what? Where are they getting our?
So when I extract it, we will be producing the protein isolate, and it'll be in a powder form because we'll spray dry it. So it'll be in a, just like your GM, or what's that store that
now you
GM,
say it. I know exactly what you're talking about, where you go buy your vitamins.
you buy your, and so you could GNC, you can buy bags of protein there, but it's just like that. It's like soy protein, but it's a protein isolate, and it'll be made from hemp. And for people who are vegans, this is like the ideal nutritional supplement.
Yeah. And speaking, I'm sure that you probably have already done this, and most of you listening probably know, but can you speak to me real quick about the benefit of the hemp protein as far as the amount of nutritional value compared to some of its outside of its not being broken down or degrading?
Well, the benefits, the human body needs a certain amount of protein to maintain its function, because what the protein's role in your diet is to make sure that you repair muscles, because your body's always it's like maintaining a car. Everything is wearing out,
right?
And in order to maintain that, you want to make sure you have everything that's putting back into your system that is being broken down, and the protein will build back all these nutritional aspects that the body is doing. The essential amino acids that we're doing in this is the amino acids are not produced in the body naturally. It's something that needs to be ingested. And if you're going to do this, as I tell people when they tell me somebody has cancer and they have cachexia, and so we'll just give them a hamburger to get the protein. Well, the body works harder in terms, there's more calorie burned. So there's energy out in terms of expelling energy to get what the nutrition value is
Digest
coming
it.
in.
I got you. Yeah.
And so what I'm doing is I'm giving individuals a better platform to
Yes.
have all their therapies happen. And I'm just a simple biochemist. I'm not somebody that reinvented all these things, but I've learned so much from people. And it's like Maslow's hammer theory. When I talk to, in the theory is for you know if you're a hammer, every problem seems to be a nail.
Yes.
And looking at people in the ethanol business or the plastics business or the nutrition business or even growing the cannabis, everybody looks at that one nail as that's the problem. And what we're looking at is a more broader aspect of looking at the whole crop and utilize everything from root to bud.
Okay, so I was actually just reading your notes about all of the different parts of your plant that you use. Can you speak to those a little bit?
So in
We've got the root, the stem, the stalk, the node, the
so
leaves, the
those
stomas.
are yeah, and again, those are and let me I can bring up my notes too. Those are the components of the plant that when people are looking at it,
I wish I had
that's
a picture to share. I'll add one in on the recording. We'll add a picture so that we can kind of show the diagram. And also I'll be sure to add your diagram that we have to the interview as we edit it, to kind of show some of the products he's talking about as well. The diagram that's on the website that I did share.
okay, perfect. Because the website, if you go to it's and there was two purposes in building the website. And being that I'm a child of deaf parents, I'm very visual. And again, it goes through I'm bilingual, bimodal, and so I used when they did a test on I was a lab rat when I was a kid. People always want to do studies on how I learned language, how my brain worked, and all this stuff because I my first language was American Sign Language. I didn't speak as my first language. I signed, so I signed mom, dad, please, more.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah,
and
I only know this one. I've heard it through brain.
yeah, and there's a multitude of signs that could go with that too, depending on what person you're talking about.
My
Uh,
neighbor's mom growing up would always talk because we were in sign language class, and our neighbor's mom would always come when we'd come home and call us bird brains. That's what she told us that we were. I don't know if that's really what that means, but
no, and the sarcasm in American Sign Language is just as robust as in spoken English.
okay.
And when you see somebody signing, it's just when somebody's when I looked at my mother signing with Marley Matlin, it was just looking at them too. It was just beautiful because my mother was like Marley Matlin, and she was an amazing, amazing deaf woman. My mother's family, they have the Connexin 26 gene, so hereditary deafness is on my mom's side. There's over 6 generations deaf in my family. And when my grandfather died, they were sharecroppers. They were very poor farmers in Tennessee. Um, and when my grandfather died, my mother was the oldest, and so she took a train at the age of 17 and she got a job as the first deaf Rosie the Riveter in Richmond, California. So she was building ships for the war and moved the family out. She earned enough money. And my dad he was from Nebraska. They were farmers there and they didn't have any work. And so my father, he also came to California and he got a job because, again, it's for a deaf individual, for people with disabilities, employment is not that it's not accessible. A lot of people don't see the value and the gift that they have.
Well, I
And
think you said it well. You know what it does to force your brain to work a different way.
yeah, and you look at a problem differently. And
Absolutely. Yeah.
it's almost like when you look at you know people were you don't want to be the smartest person in the room, because that means you're in the wrong room. That's Confucius. But when it comes to doing things like um, like with Bill Murray, he said that I find it ironic that the most dangerous thing about weed is getting caught with it. Um, that to me is like, this is a huge possibility for a crop to have in our facility, our lives. And if you look at an HBR, what we're looking at, one facility will employ high-paying, good career, raising a family jobs is what I'm looking for people to work at. One factory will hire 600 people, and these are like great jobs, and it'll enhance the community, enhance the whole environment on what you're doing. I'm not. I live in Berkeley, and there's a lot of people here who wear Birkenstocks, and they have a way of thinking. And I also sit back and say, well, you have to be sustainable in terms of making money, because you need to compete with petroleum, because that's the main driver here. And
Yeah.
if you can look at the 6,000 other products that a barrel of oil produces, and know that you can make that from hemp, what a winner we have.
Yeah. Well, and this is Matt brings up a great point too. Another part of the HBR process is their smaller carbon footprint, using hydrogen to fuel for their plants instead of fossil fuels.
Right. And so we're self-powered. And as I was and Matt, he's so gracious. When I was visiting him and his wife, um, we were talking, and I was speaking for the legislators about what we're doing, and they said, "No, Vinny, we want you to sit next to me." So one he just at dinner, he wanted to pin me down. He wanted to say, "All right,
I know that feeling.
tell me everything." And I said,
Yeah.
I have to eat too." And but we had a very robust conversation. And when I look at doing what we're doing, I have to look at, well, how am I going to power our facility? And if we use the hydrogen that we produce in our bioreactor as the off gas, because and when you're making beer and wine, I'll go back to the end, that's a very comfort level for me. When you're making beer and wine, you have the C6 sugar in your barley malt, and when you steep it and you then um, open up the sugars, you're cooking it, so you're using energy to open up you're doing the hydrolysis to open up the sugars for the yeast to eat, to digest, to convert that into two products. There's CO2 and alcohol, and that's why you have the bubbles in champagne and beer. It's the
Yeah.
CO2. In our product, what we do is we actually are using a way of breaking down the sugars where we're exposing it without any heat.
Okay.
So we're saving the energy component on the front end. So that's amazing there. So there's no petroleum in our mix to make our product, which is what we're trying to do. So we've taken petroleum out of the whole model we have. So we break it down, and we're using technical equipment that's already made. And from there, we break it down, we expose the sugars, and then I have a bacteria that will convert the sugars in terms of the C6 sugar, like you're making beer and wine. That's what they're making, and then bringing it up to butanol. I'm doing similar to making a beer, where they make beer with C6 sugar, and then you make a beer and you have the alcohol and the CO2, but then you distill it, and then the distillation then produces the ethanol. So if you have a corn beer, you're making corn ethanol, and that's what the ethanol plants are doing. That's that's an ethanol plant. What we're doing is we're not using any heat, and I'll be using hemp, and I'll be using the sugars, the C6 sugar, like everybody uses the free sugar, and the C5 sugar is the hull that no one ferments, and it's already on your property. You've already brought that in.
Right.
Why not use that? So I
Yeah.
have a bacteria will eat both the C5 and C6 sugars and convert that into biobutanol. And biobutanol is an incredible fuel. And the remaining sugars, we then convert those into two bioplastics. again, polyhydroxide alkanate, polylactic acid, PLA and PHA, and it just it's a great use for the sugars that are right there. But then while the plant's there, you want to use up everything else that's there.
Right.
And that's where I look at the oil in the seed is different than the oil in the leaf. And a lot of people think of CBD oil.
Right.
It has the THC content, and that's dry. And I can extract that oil. That's fine. But there's the oil that I want to extract from the seed, and that has huge uses in the food industry because the oil is high oleic, so it has the good component that you need in your diet to drop your bad cholesterol and boost the good cholesterol, and that's the oleic acid that you have. And that's why people talk about the Mediterranean diet. They talk about the olive oil. That's on par what's going on, and we extract it similar to like extra virgin olive oil. We're not using any solvents like typically is used. If you go into a store and then you see these exotic oils there, they're using either hexane, propane, or butane to extract the oil. And the FDA says it's small quantities. That's okay. My concern is that if you're doing any oils that have nutraceutical properties for somebody who has cancer, somebody who has AIDS, somebody who has COPD, I want to make sure that there's no solvents in that oil. I don't want that to be, because although the FDA says in small quantities it's okay, people who are on their path to trying to get better, they're looking at the most they can get in terms of what their body can take. And I don't want any of that mixture to be a combination of any solvents. So ours is solvent free, and we don't rupture the molecule. So we maintain the integrity of the oil.
Okay, there's lots of questions on here, and I want to talk about the oil, and the butanol on some of the objections that you guys have overcome, because this has been a long process, and this is just something that's really started to pick up in mainstream, in our discussions, not just ours, but in general, right? Are these biofuels and biobutanols and the, I guess, ability to actually scale them, right? And so I'm kind of curious from you, what are some of these hurdles that you've overcome to be able to prove, and what do we expect? What could I potentially expect to hear as objections that you have answers to?
Well, the question I get is, well, can you do this? And people say, well, yeah, you can do this, but it costs more to do this. And so what you're doing is you have to think, just like when I was a kid, when someone says, well, have your parents call and go here and do this. And I would always think, well, I can't do that. I had, as a 5-year-old, figure out all the different steps I needed to take to get my parents to get something accomplished that the school needed. And I had to figure that out. And so as a young kid, I was always trying to fix things. It was almost like Rube Goldberg when he's doing his trying to make a fly swatter.
Perspective, because as you say that, I think, man, my 18-year-old can, sometimes, or 17-year-old, sometimes I can barely get to figure these things out. And it's almost an opportunity that's been presented to you or put on you that has, developed the thought process. I'm impressed.
Well, I know that, I'm trying to stay on topic.
I'll scroll for you. So sorry about that.
I can talk for forever on all these other things, but let me. But when Sammy Pierce and I were talking, and he genius, and he said, I made the first biofuel. I made the first biodiesel, and the reason no one's really talking about it, it cost like $17 a gallon back then.
Yeah,
and that was 35 years ago, and so. You had to look at, well, if you have the ability to make the biodiesel, you have to find ways of making it cheaper. Mm-hmm. And just like the illustration I gave at the beginning of our talk, the petroleum industry is not using that barrel of oil to make gasoline. Right. They had to look at what we call vertical integration. We had to look at making other byproducts because you already have that. And Halliburton had talked to us. We had meetings with their chief engineer, and Scott was in the conversation, and he said it was white noise because the engineer and I had such a field day talking about butanol. I apologize, but um, it was a robust conversation. And what we were saying, that yes, we can make this, but you had to find ways to reducing the cost
Mhm.
of that one product. And to do that, instead of paying the exorbitant tipping fees that is required to dispose of your waste, we use the waste as another value added component. And that's how we got into making the protein isolate. That's how we got into making the bioplastics. That's how we got into making fuel cell technology using the hydrogen. And I'm still arguing with my team because I want to use the lignin um, as boiler fuel for my fuel cell technology, and the hydrogen to go into the recipe. And it's a recipe to make aviation biojet fuel. And it's a combination of using hydrogen, butanol, and this combination that. And instead of doing this where you're mixing it with all these different, different locations, you can do it all under one roof. And that's what we're looking at. And if you think of what we're of a HBR, and people think, well, these must be massive, like, like huge
Right.
ethanol plants, and they're not. And that's why Sammy Pierce, he tracked me down while I was making microbreweries. He goes, I
Yeah.
want you, and he pointed to me, and I kind of looked back and said, who are you talking to? He says, I want you to design an ethanol plant to make butanol, but I want it the size of a microbrewery. And you know, and he's from the South, and my mother's from the South, and the expression is "do what," and
Yeah.
that was the first thing I was thinking. Do what? And I, with him, we worked out the whole process, and I can build these on skids to where each module will have its certain component. Now, if you look at our vertical integration, again, we take out the sugars because you're not going to eat the sugars, I'm not going to eat the sugars, and people will know the corn syrup, corn sugar, causing a lot of obesity and so forth. And I'm not a health. I eat chocolate. I have my cappuccino, um, and so
Oh, it's good.
I enjoy things too. And
Yeah.
what I'm doing is I'm trying to make sure that I can utilize all the products. So if you're going to have the sugar, I'd rather use that where the bugs and the bacteria eat that to make a biochemical. So I'd rather have that make the butanol, the goes through the hydrogen, it goes through to make the bioplastics, and there's other um, products that can be made from these sugars. The the protein is for human consumption that we're looking for,
Mhm.
and again, there's a gentleman who worked with us with Sammy and with Scott. Scott took classes from him. He won the Nobel Peace Prize for saving the lives of 1 billion people. And his name was Dr. Norman Borlaug.
Mhm.
And what he did was he's very similar to, and I was saying this to Mandi, that the people in the original cannabis industry were just incredible in terms of doing their engineering and tweaking and hybriding the cannabis plants to produce certain qualities and characteristics. Norman Borlaug did that with wheat and saved the lives of 1 billion people. And you you look at the industry, we have the same potential. And I come from looking at the world again. I was born and raised in Oakland. I didn't know we were poor. I had no idea. And
Yeah.
then we were the only house in Oakland that had a telephone in the deaf community, and I was like the original interpreter for all the deaf people would come to the house and say, "Can you call for me this? Call for me that?" And that's what I did in my life. And so technology keeps moving, and looking at what we're doing, I'm looking at all these value added components to make sure that we use every part of the cannabis plant. And in our process, the only thing that's left at the end of the day is super pure water because of our process. We use every molecule in our process. There's a I sent you a,
Lignin?
there's a lignin. We also use there's a fluffy cellulose that is also a nutritional product that we make out of hemp. We also make resistant starch, and the food scientists on the call might get excited about that. We make
Yeah.
resistant starch, and resistant starch is not too many people know about it. It doesn't get digested in the upper intestine; it goes to your lower intestines, so it gives you the energy at the end of the day because it's almost like boiler fuel. But it's also great for diabetics and people are having diabetes at certain stages. That's a great food source for them because it's a great nutritional product.
Yeah. Okay, there's lots of questions. My brain is spinning about people to connect with as we've had these conversations with a number of universities and food systems and the biobutanols and the discussions about the biofuels really coming to play. So real quick, I want to say thank you very much for everybody listening. I see lots of your comments in here. If I didn't get to you, we'll be sure to reach out to you. And Vinny, I'll be sure that I get you a copy of the chat so you can reach out to people or touch base with people as well. But please let us know if you're on. I'd love to say hello and give you a shout out real quick. Question though, what do you think about capturing the CO2 from fermentation and storing it underground, or are you selling or using your CO2 in some other way?
We're the off gas we're converting it. It's coming out differently. There's a patented bioreactor that we use, and so I can turn sugar into alcohol in a matter of hours as opposed to weeks. I explained earlier in the call that I originally I'd made a lot of microbreweries, and the breweries that are making again you're using yeast, and there's lager and there's ale yeast, and people keep always looking at me and say, what's the difference? And I said, well, a lot of the places we're going to are ale microbreweries because ales turnover you can from grain to glass is 10 days. In a lager facility, grain to glass is 21 days. You have to age it longer. Using the bioreactor that I'm using, that doesn't even come into the equation. It's done in a matter of hours. We're fermenting up to the alcohol. It's incredible.
So cool. Okay, so when we talked, there was another question about above about purchase and buying. Where do the end use? Is it going into jet fuel? Is it being sold currently? And can you talk a little bit about what your needs are? There was another question about, are you franchising? So what is the business structure? Are you guys? Yeah.
Well, Scott, I tend to talk with a lot of analogies, and Scott Hewitt, my team, and he's very, very patient with me because I'm not scattered. I just multitask a lot in my head. And when he was talking to the DOD and about the aviation fuel, and they would like to when we're producing it, they would like to make a purchase order because we can't get a purchase order until we actually start producing it.
Mhm.
And Scott was saying, well, how much volume would you need? Because again, the hemp growers are going to find out, well, are we going to have a market to sell our hemp when we grow it? And it's almost like it's like the field of dreams. If you build it, they'll come. And what I'm saying is that when Scott was telling me how much how much fuel that they need, just at one facility, I would need to build. It's like in Jaws when they said we're going to need a bigger boat. It was like, oh my God, I would need to build 12 factories to meet that one demand just on the one biofuel. 12 factories.
And the
Again,
interest is there. The pull is there from the buyer and the market.
yeah.
Exactly.
And so the consumer growth, the CAGR on when people and the numbers, guys. I'm not that. I'm happier with bacteria and bugs and numbers people and all this legal stuff. I'm very pleasant with them. And when I worked at UC Berkeley, one of the schools I was responsible for was the School of Law because they're two professional schools. So Bolt Hall, and there's also School of Optometry at Berkeley. And it's like the optometrists were great to get along with. You could tell first year, second year what they're dealing with, but Butanol, is a different group dealing with attorneys, but their mindset is different. And when they look at what's going on, a lot of people tend to want to pick one piece out of what we're doing and say that's what we want to look at, and we don't want to focus on all this other stuff because that's too confusing. And I said, well, what you're missing the point. If you're just going to make the protein, or if you're just going to make the fuel, what are you going to do with all this other stuff? Because then you're going to incur other fees to get rid of it. Why not make it into something that benefits everybody in the community? And that's why we called the original family, the parent company, the Community Biorefinery, because it helps communities. And coming from,
Well, and that's what more and more I hear people talk about within the industry, right? Is the passion is not about the one product. It's the fact that the plant hits all of these verticals, from fueling and heating our homes and the energy, to the automotive, the textiles, the protein and the sugars. It's just, there aren't very many plants that can do this.
So when I was at UC Davis and people were asking me, well, have you looked at cannabis? And I said, it's illegal. We can't. And it's like I can't process.
Right.
I can't process right now at one of our pilot plants at the USDA the hemp. That's why we're looking to, when we build our facility, and we're looking at a site in South Dakota, which is a beautiful site. And we're looking to finish up funding there. It has rail, it has everything we need. And that facility, once we create it, again, the jobs will be 600 jobs that are in the facility. And with every job that's created, there are 3 jobs that are supporting because of that job. So this is a massive job creation process.
Economic impact.
And again, my background, I come from, again, congenital deafnesses in my family, and I'm concerned about that. The deaf unemployment rate for a deaf individual wanting to work, unemployment is over 50% unemployment. It's a shame. And I remember as a kid how hard it was when my parents got a job to keep that, because it's so easy for someone to say, it's hard to tell them because I would have to write something down to tell them to do it. It's like, and I get, it's heartbreaking.
I hear that.
There's so many people out there that could benefit in a situation like this. My brother-in-law, who passed away, was the chief of staff for the Department of Rehab in Arkansas, and this would be just ideal for a lot of individuals to get training to do this. I've talked to other institutes about teaching classes, having a certificate program on an HBR, and a lot of these companies, or educational companies, that's come up. The limitations they have, they can't do GI student loans, or the Department of Rehab, because it's and it's an illegal substance. But I'm not looking at someone who's training somebody in the horticulture, like in like viticulture, and I'm more looking at the science aspect and training the technical on dealing with our different products. If you look at what we're doing on our product stream, there's fractions of the protein that are not used in food consumption for humans, but they still have the nutritional value. Well, we paid for we had a CRADA with another university. We did an aquaculture study. We did fish trials. And we were told fish aren't going to live on this. They're going to die. And I said, yeah, well, we're going to, and Sammy and I said, well, we'll pay for the study. We do this. And they go, well, it's summer, so students are gone, but we'll guarantee you that they're not going to live. So we gave them the sample, and Sammy called them back a week later, and they said, no, fish are doing good, but you're too early. They're not going to live. And they said, don't call back. We'll call you. And like 2 months later, they called us and said, what is in this meal? And it was because of the complete branched chain amino acids in our meal, the fish grew twice the size. It was a perfect meal in this aquaculture study that we did for tilapia. And tilapia, if you look in the Bible, that was the fish that Jesus fed the thousands of. And it was tilapia.
Yeah.
And it was like amazing. And the fish grew. And so after you see that, and when my daughter was young, one of her favorite books was, um, Everybody Poops. And going with that theme, if you look, the fish, the manure was then going at the bottom, and we used that manure into a hydroponics. Now I can actually then use the hydroponics, using a vertical hydroponic system, and growing all the vegetables that a community needs. It can also be used in studies where we want to specifically hybrid certain characteristics in our plants to produce certain characteristics. And we could do that all in-house. So all these are jobs that are created under one roof.
It's incredible. Incredible. David, I agree. A godsend. It really touches on all of these pieces to be able to bring it together. And it's not just an idea. It's something you guys have been doing and been able to prove out and have your patents in order and ready. What about your end buyers? We've only got a couple minutes left, but I have a question about the butanol versus the ethanol for the fuels and the fuel industry. Are we getting a lot of pull from, say, automotive or jet fuel for a more sustainable, longer lasting product? Like what's that pull really look like?
Well, now I'm not in the petroleum industry,
Right.
So I'm not I won't claim to be an expert. I'm just this little guy on my video phone chatting with you. But I can tell you, when I was talking to Halliburton, and one of the things that they're looking at, there's the federal green mandate where they have to have a certain percentage of basically a biofuel in the gasoline mix. That's what we want. And that's what we want, a mixture. We want a cleaner burning fuel in our car. And if you look, everybody's going to ethanol. And ethanol, again, is something you're making corn whiskey. That's what ethanol is. If you do butanol, it is very difficult to make, and UC Berkeley got a cash infusion from British Petroleum to try to make biobutanol. And the reason British Petroleum was doing that is that butanol is the only biofuel that can go through the pipeline. Ethanol can't go through the pipeline. It's not a good fit. It separates. It's almost like, and I explained this to friends who were having dinner. Ethanol is like Italian dressing, oil and vinegar, and it'll separate, and you have to shake it up to mix it. That's what ethanol does. They blend it in a splash blend. Butanol is like ranch dressing. Okay. It's completely emulsified. Once it's in there, it can go straight through. So you don't have to change your infrastructure. You don't have to change the whole time. You don't even have to change the inner workings of your engine, because it's such a symbiotic blend that you have with gasoline.
I did see a comment that there was I wanted to see if I can find it right here. Butanol is considered to be a potential biofuel, or butanol fuel, and it provides more energy for a given volume than ethanol. The problem with ethanol is moisture absorption. Does butanol cancel this out? I think you kind of touched about this earlier, but
the Alexander should be on the call with us. That's what when I start talking to people about this, that's what they don't realize. That they're going, okay, it's green, it's better, put it in. But again, you have to weigh it out. What is the best for us and everybody? And I think that if you go the butanol route, it's a better, and I'm trying not to be technical in my comment, but it's a better surfactant. It blends in perfectly.
It's awesome. Okay, one more, and then we've got to jump off here because I want to keep talking. But Matt, you're exactly right. Let's get this video in front of more investment groups so we can get this rolling here in the United States. However we can help, I'm all about this. And like I said, I could keep diving into each one of these topics. I would love to invite you back and continue to do, deep dive discussions or more discussions about any one of these products that you create. It's not, we're no longer just talking about, fiber production or textiles, but these are big solutions or opportunities that the industry has to get involved, from farm to our automotive industries.
And what we're looking at, it's a paradigm shift. And what if people can look at this, we're not trying to change the way people are viewing the world, their life. This is something that could fit in their life. And when we come to looking at the price point, and this is what a lot of people do, when you go in the supermarket and you have two products on the shelf, one sitting next to another, and you have a family to raise, and you know that you're going to pay $1 more because this is a green product, you might not do that. Because you're very conscious about that. But if you have the same product on the shelf and they both do the same function, but
yes,
and they're the same price, then you can sit there and say, let me invest in this, because one, it's an American product. It's produced in South Dakota. If we do the factory in South Dakota, it's produced there. You're employing people in the U.S. doing this. It supports it. And this whole the supply chain issue that we're dealing with right now, because all these if I can look out my window at the bay, you have all these ships out there waiting to get into the port of Oakland, and they can't get in because it's like, why not have it to where the inner cities start building out again? This is perfect for it's a perfect model for that.
I love it. Okay, well, we'll get more things on the schedule, and we'll make sure that all of you are invited. Thank you so much for joining. Please feel free to reach out to Vinny. I did share the links to the websites and some of his videos for both the protein and the biobutanol. Real quick, Vinny, what's the input look like? How many acres are we looking at as far as need for input on cannabis stock?
Well, there's the numbers, and Sammy he loved doing this numbers, because and what we're looking at is that we're trying to cut down on the length between the farmer and our factory, and we want to make that delivery point as convenient and cheap as possible, so that we don't expend money on transportation fuel, because I don't want to spend money on energy to bring a product to where we're going to make energy. That to me, it's like it's an oxymoron there.
Sure.
So that's what we're looking at. South Dakota is ideal for that. There's rails that go straight into the facility. They have corn going in there right now.
Yeah.
One of the concerns that I have, and I'm the leader with the group on doing this with hemp, and we've spent our R&D, we've spent over $20 million to perfecting what we're doing. And we've had creatives with 8 different universities testing. So we've been verified by third-party engineering firms. So we are verified. Everything I'm saying is done. It's not me saying that. It's not you saying it, Mandi. This is verified by independent third-party engineers. When we do our protein, we send it out. Is this a true protein isolate? And it's yes. Under protein efficient ratio, it's a perfect protein. Yeah. So we're doing all this, and we're looking for investors that want to team up with us. We're with the Jobs Act that's going on with the what was happening. We now have this on our website. You can look at that as a accredited investor, and so where I'm not taking advantage of somebody that's just going from month to month. Accredited investors can invest in this, and this is something that's going to be beneficial for everybody.
Awesome. Well, I'm very, very excited. Like I said, I know that I keep saying that, and I've been wanting to push this interview for a long time. So thank you so much for spending the hour with me. And thank you everybody else for joining in. For those of you, I saw that Joanne posted a comment. If you guys have questions about joining or supporting the work that Global Hemp Association does, we'd love to have you involved. You can reach out to Joanne at globalhempassociation.org or find us on our website, globalhempassociation.org. And then also I wanted to throw out, the association has teamed up with a research group to put together variety trials, fiber variety trials nationally. And so there are options to get involved there. both sponsoring, supporting, getting involved. But we're going to be putting out lots of data to help feed into organizations just like yours, Vinny, to figure out what does our input look like across the nation. So I welcome you guys to get involved. Other than that, thank you, Vinny. Anything else before we sign off?
I want to tell everybody who's listening to the call that the Global Hemp Association is a very dynamic group. And I can tell you that I've spoken to other individuals, and I don't know, maybe they slept in during their OChem classes and a lot of this is over their head. But thank you so much, Mandi. You and Kayla were like rock stars.
Thank
and
you.
Listening to us, and your website and doing what you're doing is really going to make a huge difference in the hemp industry.
Thank
and
you.
As I was saying earlier, we've done a lot of different feedstocks, and I want to make sure that hemp is the first feedstock we're looking at, because we've done studies on corn and soy. We've proven that out. And if we start building those factories, hemp will take a back seat, and you won't get the amount of attention and work that can be done that I see the possibilities with. And so I'm very motivated and wanting to push hemp as being the first feedstock in our factory.
Me too. I'll be right there with you. Okay, Vinny, well, let's touch base again. My week slows down a little bit. I got my car taken care of finally, so that's good. I'm over my sickness, knock on wood. So anyways, thank you very, very much. Thank you again, everybody. We'll see you guys later.
And good for you. Thank you very much.
Hey, talk to you later.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.